Hi everyone, Carrie Severson. I've been in the storytelling business for more than 20 years. I grew up in it. My grandfather was an author and a professor. Have a journalism degree from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism. I've written about everything from presidents and celebrities to fires, dog therapy, and eventually I even wrote about pens. Eventually I got into personal essay writing and started a coaching business where I helped women around the world write stories about their own life. And that led to stage work, coaching stage work, and the last little bit of storytelling experience happened for me in 2019 when I started the Unapologetic Voice House. It was a dream that I actually never knew I had. I never thought I would be a publisher. It makes a lot of sense though, because I am an entrepreneur and then I know books, I know stories, and I'm really good at marketing. I've built 3 businesses. My first business was a nonprofit, and I created an after-school program called Supergirl. And a publisher called Morgan James actually approached me and said, hey, you should turn this after-school program into a series of books. And I did, and that's how I became a published author. I marketed that for years. I created a train the trainer program, went around the country. It was fantastic. My experience with Morgan James was perfect. It was really good. I loved them. However, despite how perfect it was, I still felt as if there could have been more, right? So when I created the Unapologetic Voice House, I decided to create an experience that I wanted to have when I went through it as a client. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. First, one of the very first questions I get is, how do I know this is a book? A lot of people question whether or not they should publish a book or if they should just put it on a website or blog or, maybe it's website material. How do you know it's a book? And I always say the same thing. If you have more than 3 lessons to share, it's a book. 3 lessons is usually 3 simple lessons that you can create and pull down to 2,000 words or less is not a book. That's an essay. Go get that published on some, Forbes or something like that. But if you have life experience that you want to put into piles and you've got 10 different piles around you, that's a book. I know a lot of people want to write business books. I know a lot of people want to write self-development books. If you can think about 10 different chapter headlines with 10 different lessons in it, you've got a book. Other people are looking for a book simply because they want to sell something from stage, or they want to have a table and sign them into something else, like a package coaching deal. I don't work with people like that. It doesn't feel good to me. I don't think the purpose behind the book is actually genuine. And so if that is your sole purpose for creating a book, consider doing something else, because it's not sustainable. That's just my personal opinion as a publisher now. So really go back to your heart lesson. If you feel like you've got something to say that is going to make an impact on someone else's life through a lesson, that's a book. Okay, so the 3 types of publishing. There's traditional publishing, there's self-publishing, and there's independent publishing. In the 80s and 90s, up until the 80s, really, traditional publishing was really the only way for you to get published. You had to pitch an agent, and then that agent would go to bat for you and try to get you a publishing deal through Random House, St. Martin's Press, Penguin, even HarperCollins, and now Hay House, I think, is a big publisher. That's not the case anymore. When entrepreneurs decided that they weren't going to wait around for the time it takes a traditional publisher to publish your book, entrepreneurs really created this sort of self-publishing space where they decided they were going to have something happening on stage. They were going to want to sell something, and they needed a book now. And a lot of self-publishing companies, Amazon, I think, is the biggest one. A lot of Hay House has Balboa Press, I think. A lot of them are rushed. Like you can create something today and have something self-published, I think, as early as like next month, probably even sooner. So there are plenty of pros when it comes to the benefits of self-publishing, timing and speed being one of them. There's also cons. And then let me talk about independent publishing. So independent publishing is the space between the two, traditional and self. Traditional publishing, the benefit of traditional publishing obviously is distribution. The benefit of self-publishing is the biggest benefit is that you get to keep the rights to your book. Independent publishing sort of merges those two pieces. You keep the rights to your book with an independent publisher, like the Unapologetic Voice House, and you get distribution through our channels. And that's the case with most independent publishers. Most publishers around the block, regardless of what category they're in, independent, self, or traditional, most everybody works in the print-on-demand space now because it eliminates waste. So traditional publishers years ago would only do small print runs. They would publish books, put them out into bookstores. But then what happens when those books don't actually leave the bookstores? The bookstores would then have to send them back to the distribution, the warehouse, and there they would sit still. It's a lot of waste. And the cost of the printing, the shipping, the freight always falls back onto the author, and then the author has to decide on what to do with it. Print on demand eliminates all of it, all of the risk of books not being sold, the waste, the paper, the shipping, the freight, all of it. So most everybody these days does print on demand, which is a phenomenal opportunity. So the distribution is still there. Somebody in a small town in Wisconsin can walk into their local bookstore and say, hey, I want to buy this book. I want you to be able to order it for me so I don't give the money to Amazon. I want you as a local bookstore to be able to have it. That bookstore can either call the distributor or the publisher and say, hey, I'd like to order a couple of books to keep them here in store, or they can order directly and have it shipped to you. Print on demand is a phenomenal asset across the board. Self-publishing is typically all print on demand. But it's perfect. I love it. Okay. The benefit of independent publishing really is this asset of you being able to keep your rights to your book, having the distribution opportunity, and then a partner to walk you through the steps, very similar to traditional. Self-publishing is a piecemeal kind of system where you as the author are also the publisher, also your agent. You're also the marketer. You're the one that's finding the editor, the designer, the formatter. You have to piecemeal all these elements together. And it solely falls on you unless you hire a team. A lot of people believe that if they self-publish, they're going to have a smaller investment, which is not true. Editors are usually, they're paid by word or by project. That's not true. They're paid by word, project, or page. I've paid editors in 3 different ways. There's usually 3 rounds of edits that happen on every project. So if you're thinking that you're going to get away with self-publishing and only paying an editor a couple $100s, you're mistaken. It is usually more like a couple $1,000s for an editor. I get to. I pay 2 different editors. I pay a copy editor and a proofreader. And the reason we work with 2 different editors is because editors are human and mistakes always happen. Mistakes happen to the biggest authors. I mean, there's even there's a group that will look for copy editing mistakes in hardcover books by like Stephen King and stuff. Anyway, so we pay for a copy editor and we pay for a proofreader. And so it's usually about $2,000, in the ballpark of about $2,000 goes to that. So let's get into, I think I've covered pros and cons. Pros of traditional being you have a team. And team, I mean, traditional publishing has really changed in the 80s and 90s, or even in early 2000s. You would have a marketing team behind you. Nowadays, to get a traditional deal, you have to have a big audience. The reason I actually created the Unapologetic Voice House is because I spent 5 years pitching traditional agents a book that I wrote about personal development, spirituality, and I couldn't get an agent. And every agent I talked to was like, come back when you have 5,000 followers more. So I spent about 5 years growing my list and my audience. I have roughly about 35,000 followers across all social media platforms. My biggest one being LinkedIn, which is about 13,000. And every time an agent would come back and say, I love your project, but you just don't have enough followers. I can't pick it up. So nowadays, a traditional publisher really wants you to have more like 50,000 to 100,000, particularly if you're going into the personal development space, which a lot of authors are. Personal development or business, I would say you would have to have something closer to 50 to 100 to get a traditional deal. So that being said, if that is something you want, work on developing your platform first. The con of traditional, between the pro and con, when you're going after a traditional deal, is the author is the very last person to get paid. So the retailer is the first person, the distributor, and then if you have a middle person like an agent, they get paid, and you would be paid last. So traditional deals, the author usually gets 10% of a royalty. So really you're looking at $1 or less per book. So going back to this concept of like, everyone asks me, am I going to make money? I can't tell you that because if you're going traditional, I have no idea when you're going to make your money, any money. If you're going self, same thing. You're the one that's responsible for actually going out and selling your book. And if you're going independent with someone like the Unapologetic Voice House, it really does come down to how good your book is, where we market, and how well we advertise. So advertising and marketing are two separate categories. And, I work on the advertising aspect. You have to work on the marketing aspect. So book publishing is kind of it's a long game. It's a marathon. And before you step into it, learning all these different aspects of publishing, it's important that you get into that mindset of, this isn't a easy get rich quick kind of thing. This is a long game to help you build your platform, your name, give you opportunity to get out into the public. And it is it's like a child. It really is. Okay, so pros and cons of self-publishing, I think I've touched on. You get to keep the rights to your book, own the rights to your book, but then you're also responsible for going out and making sure that you're marketing it everywhere. You get the biggest royalty, so the retailer will be paid first. So regardless of where you self-publish, they get paid first, and then you get paid. So you're getting more money, obviously, than you would if you were going through a traditional publisher. Now, independent publishing. Independent publishing requires a upfront investment, and I'm not sure how other independent publishers work. I'll tell you how I set it up. I set up the house where clients come in and they basically hire us to do everything from edit their book to distribute their book. And in that, I include some advertising opportunities. That's our like bread and butter package. I do have an opportunity where people can simply bring in a manuscript that's already gone through editing and format and design, and basically they just want to work with us for marketing and distribution. That's something else that we do. That's a different package. But the independent publishers typically ask for an investment up front, and then they put your book through several different processes: editing, proofreading, formatting, design, distribution. And then people who work with me, actually, I take about $2,000 of the investment and do things like press release out to mainstream media. Or just yesterday, I approved advertising in a book catalog that goes out to about 4,000 independent book owners. We also do, we buy placemat, or we buy segments or little ads that go out to librarians and book lovers, things like that. So there is an investment. So let's talk about the investment. Everyone asks, what is this going to cost? It varies on what you want to do. I know independent publishers charge anywhere from $7,500 all the way up to $20,000. Depends on what you want to do. Our mainstream bread and butter package is $10,000, and that does include an editor, a proofreader, the format, the design, distribution. You are given books yourself to actually go out and sell, and then we include some marketing in that. And it's a long process. It's about a 7-month experience. I don't know what other people, I do know what other people charge. They charge anywhere from $75,000 to about $20,000. I will say that the folks that are charging $75,000 are not including advertising. So that is something that, I'm always able to a la carte and take off. However, it's incredibly important, and this is another question I get, is, how much do I really have to market or advertise in order for your book to be seen and read? In 2017, there were more than 1 million self-published books. My first book that I published was a sci-fi book, and the category that we published in had 30,000 books. His book it's not producing results. So we're having to, play a game B. How can we market this better? How can we get into a new category? Marketing and advertising your book is incredibly important. So if you're not going to do that through us, highly recommend you do it through somebody. I have people that will, I have clients who will ask me to do Amazon ads for them. I have one running right now for Valentine's Day on a poetry book, a romance poetry book. It's doing phenomenal. She's selling the most copies out of any book that we have. I do have 2 bestsellers out of the couple. I've published 3 books so far, and 2 of them are bestsellers based on advertising that we've done. So it is incredibly important. So again, if you're not going to do it, and we're going to a la carte that and take that off of your investment, know that in order to turn books, you do have to do it somewhere. So another question I get is, does it really matter if you have a platform? It doesn't matter if you have a platform. However, it is highly encouraged that you use your book to grow your voice, and that you use your book to actually put something out into the world from a social media perspective. We encourage our authors to actually do lives, do readings, interviews, podcast interviews. Put yourself out there so that people can know, like, and see you, right? It's just like any other coach, but then that you're trying to help them recognize that you have a product that could potentially teach them something, lighten their mood, bring them peace around one element or another. So marketing on your end is incredibly important. One second. A lot of my conversations, people just want to give us their product and then sort of walk away. I don't take projects on like that. This is a partnership. And if you are working with any publisher, traditional, self, or independent, if your mindset is, I'm just going to give you my book and then receive royalties, I highly encourage you to do some research, because that's not how any publisher should operate. If you're just going to pay somebody to produce a product and your expectation is you're going to get something in return, I would do some research. That's not how this works. I partner with people. These people are my family. My clients are invited to my wedding. We do business together. We do life together. This is a long-term project. It is a marathon. When you publish a book, you can never take it back. It'll always be out there somewhere, some way, somehow. To take it off the shelf does require a lot of effort and it's something that you never really want to have happen. So when you publish a book, it is, it's a long-term project. The last question I get a lot of times is, how fast can this happen? And speed kills. That's always my response. Speed kills. I won't do anything shorter than 6 months. And that actually makes me kind of creep like this. It's usually a 7-month experience with us. You can tell when somebody has rushed a product, a book, and self-published and put it out simply to put it out. There are mistakes, formatting mistakes, spacing mistakes, spelling mistakes. That's not something we want to do. When that happens, you get bad reviews. People don't want to purchase your book, and then you have that shipping return thing happen, because somebody can purchase your book, literally have it in hand, and then return it to Amazon and say, this isn't what I expected, or whatever distributor, retailer they're going to go through. We've seen that happen. Not personally, but just in the industry. So speed kills. Expect to take your time through this process. If you are at the point where you're still writing, start to research publishers now. I usually accept a project when it's complete in terms of, the writer has gone through maybe 2 or 3 drafts. I don't like projects that, I work with authors all the time for years, and authors tend to be perfectionists. When you're in that mindset, it's going to kill you. And so I like to bring in projects that are still in that, they're past the draft form, but they may not necessarily be 100% complete. And the reason I say that is because I'm going to match you with an editor that matches your vibe, the energy that you got going on as a writer, and then the book itself. And you are going to sort of go off into your own little universe with your editor, and you're going to stay there for a couple of months. And you're going to go through 2 more, 3 more drafts with a professional editor. The project that you send me may not be the project that I actually see after it's gone through editing. And then I'm going to put you through a proofreading process. So I won't do anything less than 7 months, 6 months, like I said, being like the earliest. So again, if you're going to go through self-publishing, really take your time through this, because you're responsible for everything, and you want people to love your project and partner with your project. Traditional publishing is a much slower process. The reason being is because you have to go find an agent first, and that could honestly take you years. And then they're going to go find you a book deal, which could also take you years. So if you're considering traditional publishing and you think that this is going to be something quick, try to detach that concept and just go into pitching like a game. And if you are going to do traditional and you need some advice on that, we can talk about that offline. I don't want to spend any more time talking about traditional because it's a different entity. Let's see. I feel like I've covered all the questions that I typically get, and what I will say is that the Unapologetic Voice House is really interested in publishing and launching strong female voices. We publish both fiction and nonfiction. If we're doing fiction, the author can be male or female, it doesn't matter to me. The voice in the book has to contain a strong female voice. So my next book that I'm publishing is called 18. It's a fiction book. And it's about a pro golfer whose life turns upside down. And two of the actual characters in the book are strong females. And so I was really attracted to it. I have a number of memoirs coming out. I've got a romance book coming out in 2020 and an anthology about motherhood coming out. So we've got some really exciting projects in the works. The 2 pieces that I do not pick up or publish yet are cookbooks because of the color printing, which is something else I guess I should touch on, and children's books, again, because of the illustration. So when I first signed on with our distributor, which is called IPG, we were told that the 2 hardest categories to turn a profit in are cookbooks and children's books. And it's because of the actual price to produce the product. Cookbooks usually can't be print-on-demand books because of the color printing inside with images, obviously. And same with children's books. It's an incredibly competitive category. And if you go and you look at the bookstore, literally the majority of the bookstore these days is children's books. And then, Barnes & Noble is split, where children's books runs that entire side. In the middle is usually like, the games, cookbooks, self-development. And then the other side of the bookstore is everything from business to spiritual to fiction. Children's books cover an entire section. It's actually bigger. And for some reason, it's really hard to turn print on demand on those two categories. So those are the only two categories we don't work with. There are plenty of publishers that do. And if that is your jive, in our connection call that we have, your private session here, 30-minute call, I'll give you a couple of insights into publishers I know who are doing those things. The last thing I will say is about distribution. Okay, so distribution, there are plenty of people that work in the publishing business, right? There is the publisher, there's the writer, there's the editor, there's the designer, the distributor, and the retailer. The distributor is really the middleman. And that's the piece that self-publishing cut out, the distributor. If you are looking to get out into the masses and you do want the independent bookstores in Middle America to be able to host your product, be able to invite you into their store and do a little talk or something, book signing, self-publishing is not the way to go. If you self-publish, you are every bookstore's competitor. And that's something I don't think a lot of people that go self-publishing realize. You're a publisher if you self-publish, right? Why would a bookstore invite you in when you're not working on their team? So I've had friends who have self-published who have tried to get book signings at bookstores and they get denied. So they have to go do book signings at places like yoga studios, restaurants, which works too, just not with bookstores. When I created my deal with our distributor, which is called Independent Publishing Group, IPG, the deal was that our authors would have access to their relationships. And they have, our channels of distribution are with libraries, bookstores, and e-vendors. So our authors are able to publish their books out to about 50,000 libraries, about 350 independent bookstores, and then I think it's 42 e-distributors now. It's pretty cool. Distribution definitely changes the game. So there is a ton to think about in terms of where you go and what category you want to go in, traditional, self, or independent. And I highly recommend that you take some time to really think about your end game, your end goals, and what direction it would be best for you to go in. So if you are in the space where you're finished with your product, your manuscript, and you're ready to go into the publishing aspect, I'm happy to talk to you about, what category would be best for you. I've said no to a lot of projects because their end goals aren't where we are. Their end goals do not fit our vision or mission, and we can't support, their goals. And so they go in a different direction. I'm more than happy to give you some feedback on what would be best for you in your project. So if you have any additional questions, please write them down, save them for our call. I hope to talk to you very soon, and thank you so much.